All right, so I'll be talking about the governance as my global challenge, and also the case study is time for Africa to define herself when it comes to democracy, and it was said by Professor Pierre Lumumba during his Peace and Unity Treaty in Kigali. I'm going to talk about the important facts. Also going to talk about the key issues in this case study. We're also going to talk about the course of action. Then I'll end by giving the recommendation from the case study, and also I have attached the video for the case study that was published by the Professor Pierre Lumumba. Let's jump in and discuss. First of all, we're going to evaluate the case study, because the case study is talked about the democracy. We're going to evaluate the democracy in African concept and also in European concept. So starting with, in Africa, democracy is about, they define the democracy as the right for everyone to choose for their leader, in terms of voting. And according to Professor Pierre Lumumba, that's the European democracy that was started by the Greek as the first country in the world to be democratic in 18th century. So in African concept, does really voting mean democracy? Well, to me, and also based on what Professor Mba said, I think voting is not all about democracy. Democracy is something big beyond voting. Democracy is big, is beyond electing for the leaders, choosing for the leaders in terms of choosing, in terms of voting. So in this concept, democracy is more than that. Democracy is, first of all, understanding the concept of African democracy, whereby the leaders are able to do things for the citizens, are able to construct the infrastructure, roads, and also the sector of health. So the democracy is a very big concept, but in African concept, but in most of Africans define democracy as the system where leaders are elected by voting. We're also going to talk about the most important facts for the case study, whereby, as I said, the origin of definition of the democracy, it came from the Greek one, and also the Greece being the first country in the world to be democratic or to practice the democracy in form of voting and people electing the leaders by using the elections. Also, we're going to talk about however much Africa is not that much democratic, but also the international organizations have identified those 11 African countries that are trying to be democratic, as also we're going to be talking about as a key study, as a important key fact. We're also going to end by where does Professor Pierre Lumumba understand when it comes to the concept of democracy in both European and African concept. At the countries they have come up with, which are trying to be democratic, whereby we have Botswana, Mauritius, Cape Verde, Senegal, Tunisia, Ghana, Nigeria, Sao Tome and Principe, Namibia, South Africa, and Benin. Well, this doesn't mean that these countries are really understanding the concept of democracy in terms of African concept. It's not like that. For them, they're also following the European concept, depending on who colonized them. If you are colonized by Britain, you define a concept in the democracy in terms of British. If you're colonized by France, you're going to determine or define the democracy in terms of French. When you're colonized by Spain, you're going to define or understand the concept of democracy in Spanish, as well as Portuguese. When you're colonized by Portugal, here you're going to define or understand the concept of democracy in terms of Portuguese. The remaining countries also, actually they're almost in the same, but then this at least understands, they have really tried to understand among other African countries. The key issues here, it's multi-party politics. This is how the African countries understand democracy. And this is European concept. For the fact that we are colonized by European people, this is how we understand. We understand that democracy is whereby we have more than one political party in the country. Also, frequent elections. We understand our concept of democracy in whereby we have elections either after 5 years or after 10 years or after 7 years, as most of African countries do this. We also understand democracy as presidential term limits, whereby African countries, African presidents have the limits for the presidents. Well, this does not matter when it comes to Professor Lumumba. For him, presidential term limits does not define democracy in African concept, whereby we can take the example of the Russia or China. We have not had elections in the 10 years, or even 15 years in these countries. But these are countries which are developed and they are good in terms of democracy. But then for the Africans, they know that a president who rules for wrong, I mean for a long period of time, then they are misusing democracy. We can also take an example of Muammar Gaddafi. He ruled Arabia for more than 35 years, but then the things were there, like the education system, the infrastructure, the guy had done on health system, everything was in term. So based on me and also what the Professor Pierre Lumumba is saying, that presidential term limits does not matter as long as the leader is able to serve the people, as long as the leader is providing the economic development for the nation, whereby people are democratic, whereby they have food to eat on table, they have access to health, they have access to education, quality education, they have access to infrastructure, technology. That's democracy in African concept. For the limits of the presidential limits, it does not matter. For the frequent elections, this one, even if the president can rule for more than 50 years, as long as they are standing standards, the development and other things that I've mentioned. Challenges in the case study. Of course, what we define as democracy, at the end of the day, it ends bringing a lot of challenges, endless wars and conflicts. This is something that is happening in almost every country in Africa. The endless wars and conflicts are because of what we define as a democracy. When we organize elections, whereby elections in most of African countries, it's considered as the ethnicity, the groups, the tribes. The tribe, it actually defines the census which tribe has more than people. We can talk about Kenya in 2007. There was a war. A lot of people were killed. So hereby, when even in Uganda, just recently it happened. So when it comes to the voting or elections, because election is based on tribes, the ethnicity. So when the other ethnicity with more people and wins, this one with low people, few people, it's going to say the elections was raped, and at the end of the day, it's going to cause a lot of problems, conflicts, and wars. Corruption. We have seen African leaders promoting corruption to keep them as a protection, because the people around this leader, they are going to, the leader is going to give them a lot of money, the corruption in terms of protecting this person to keep him or her in power. As at the end of the day, low economic development in Africa is going to be the outcome, because there is corruption, there's wars, there's low economic development in African countries. So what we define as democracy, at the end of the day, it ends in a lot of challenges and problems. Of action. So since the journey from in the 1960s, most African countries gained their independence, but then these countries were not fully free from colonial masters. We are still decolonized. Our mind is still colonized. I also talk about what takes for Africans to be free from decolonization. It's about our mindset. We have to set our mindset, starting from young people. The education system should change and teach our young people how we can get set free from being decolonized. The colonizing mind is more even harmful than direct colonization. So we are still decolonized. That's why we are still even understanding the concept of democracy in European concept. The Pan-African split among young people. This is something that should be started from young age. Pan-Africanism, trying to teach these people the ideology of being a Pan-African. Also, ethnicity, identities, and unity. This is something that we should try to avoid. Ethnicities and identities also unite. We become one people with one goal and one achievement. This question, is decolonization real in Africa? This is real 100%. According to Professor Pierre Lumumba, he said in his video that all African countries and people are still decolonized by their mind. These Europeans are still colonizing us our mind. We are still thinking that these people are the ones to make choice for us. We are still thinking that when you're going to elect the these people that wants to come, the European Union has to come in to see if this election was fair and free. We should set our mind free from being colonized. Here is my recommendation. First of all, let's understand the problem. Are we really understanding the problem, or we are not? After understanding that we are still colonized by mind, then we can come up with the solution. Then the next one is understanding democracy in African context. We should understand, we should teach people, our young people from schools, the concept of democracy in African context, not European context. We should understand that the democracy is not about how many years the president is going to rule. Is it about election? It's about providing services to the people. It's about being democratic, being able to get health care, being able to have access to education, being able to have infrastructure, economic development, setting jobs and employment for young people, getting food to eat, getting zero hunger, eliminating diseases. That's the democracy in African concept. We also get to unite as Africans. We should eliminate ethnicity, the groups. We should try to be African one, to bring all the continent as one continent, come up with one language, come up with one parliament, as also one of the key studies to promote democracy. The last one is involving youth leader. Today, youth are the key founders, are the key powers for the African development. We should not leave them behind when also it comes to democracy. We have seen youth in technology, we have seen them in leadership, we have seen them in different things. We should also get involved in terms of defining democracy. Here is the video for the case study, or where I got the information. And as I said, Moses, and thank you so much for listening.